Well, good morning, and happy Father's Day. Where are my dads at? Make a little bit of noise. Yeah, I got a few. Hey, we got a lot of stuff going on as dads. We got dad strength, right? We're allowed to have dad bods, and we got our own dad jokes. So being a dad is pretty cool. We get a lot of stuff, and today's Father's Day, so happy Father's Day. Thank you so much for being here and being with us today. We're actually we're continuing our series called Lost Privileges, and one of the things about this series that we're going to hear over and over and over is things have changed fast. And I know you know that. I know that you feel that, you see that in the world around you and everything else. But one of the things that happens is when things change fast is we kind of lose hold of the future. And so when I talk to people about what they're thinking about for the future, whether that's next month, next year, or next decade, whatever, when I talk to people about the future, here's what I'm finding, and maybe you found kind of the same thing, that for some reason, a lot of people, when they think of the future, they're kind of, there's a small percentage of people are actually really excited about it. They're kind of, pumped about it. They feel like a lot of good things are about to happen. There's probably a little bit larger group of people that are almost a little bit hopeless. They feel like nothing good is happening, nothing good is coming, nothing much. And the big percentage of people in the middle are largely saying, I don't really have time to think about the future. And it's because of the speed of change, right? Things are happening so fast that I'm just trying to navigate today, much less think about the future. And as we go through this series about lost privileges, we're going to keep coming back to this idea of what does the future look like? Because there is a group of people that feels like they have no future. And I hope that's not you, but it might be, or it might be somebody that you know. And so what do you do when you feel like the future is at the very least confusing, if not hopeful? Now, one of the things that's happened, you may not know this, and by the way, when I say this, I'm not paranoid, I'm not conspiracy theorist, I'm not any of those things. This is just a term that I'm going to use here in just a second that sociologists use, okay? It's just a description. It's just a factual description of the world. But they have recategorized kind of our culture as what it is and what they're projecting it to be. And within our culture, Christians are considered a cognitive minority. Now, a couple of things. What does all that mean? A couple of things. One, I don't usually use the word Christian, and here's why. I don't think it's a bad word. I don't think it's a bad thing. But so many people have so many different things about what they think it means to say Christian. I'm a Christian because, when I was little, I went to church. Or, I'm born in America. Or, my parents go to church, so we're Christian. I mean, it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And so what I prefer to say is I'm a follower of Jesus or I'm following Jesus. Because that's very specific, that's very direct, that kind of narrows the field. Who are you talking about? People that follow Jesus. And people that follow Jesus are now a cognitive minority in our culture. What does this have to do with anything? Here's where this starts to hit home. What it means is a cognitive minority is not disparaging or anything else. It just simply means there is a subset of our culture whose values, whose practices, whose norms, whose beliefs are kind of at odds with the majority opinion. Like, they don't really fit in with everybody else. They don't seem to believe the things that everybody else believes. They don't seem to live the way that everybody else lives. They don't have the same values that everybody else lives, and therefore they're considered a cognitive minority. And any sociologist would say, whether Christianity or followers of Jesus were ever a majority, they are by now definitely a cognitive minority. And the only problem with any of this is, as you know, anytime there's a minority and a majority, sooner or later, the majority tries to get the minority to come alongside, right? To compromise, to change, to get in line, to go along with, to just fit in. And sometimes it's gentle peer pressure, sometimes it's legislation, sometimes it's even threats and violence. And this doesn't have anything to do with religion. This is just majority, minority. It always happens this way. It always plays out where the majority tries to get the minority group to come alongside. And so a lot of people look at this, especially as Christians, and they think, ugh, things are going to get bad. Things aren't good. Things aren't like they used to be. What are we going to do? It's probably no more apparent than where it comes to morality, right? And not just morality, and I apologize, I'm not trying to offend anybody, but sexual morality seems to be kind of this almost dividing line between Christianity and this culture around us, or followers of Jesus. Now, a follower of Jesus would say really two simple things when it comes to this. One, that sex is reserved for marriage between a man and a woman because of how powerful it is, what an incredible gift it is, how God designed us and created us. That is the proper context for it. And anywhere else or everywhere else really is outside of God's design and God's purpose. And biblical sexual morality would also even continue on to the unborn, that every life is precious, every life is valuable, every life should be protected. Now you can see, obviously, if somebody holds on to those ideas, how the majority culture would say, no, we don't agree with that. That's not the way we see it. That's not what we value. That's not how we understand it. And as a result, here's the perfect fleshing out of how this works. Christianity, followers of Jesus, now have the moral low ground. Like if you follow Jesus and you follow Jesus' example and his teaching, you now, when it comes to sexuality, if you hold on to that, you are now not only in disagreement with the culture, you have the moral low ground. And you are becoming a hurdle to the rest of the culture. And whereas in one time, one season, Christianity was probably seen to be, people that are nice, people that are kind, people that are thoughtful, people that are helpful, now they've become objects to work around. And while this isn't most, there are some that feel like the future would be better if the future of Christianity was pushed down. And that is extreme. And I don't believe that's happening on a grand scale. And I don't think there's some big master plan behind all this that somebody's working to get rid of Christians. But the reality is, it's not that hard to see that as a projection, that it could go, eventually could become something like that. And that pushes people that follow Jesus out on the fringe. And the fringe is a tough place to be, isn't it? I mean, the fringe is uncomfortable because we don't really know what the future is going to be when we're on the fringe. We don't have as much security. We don't have as much confidence. We feel like we could be more easily upended when we're out on the fringe. And we definitely know one thing. When you're out on the fringe, you're not as important as when you are in the middle with the core. You're secondary, you're third choice. You're not that important. You're fringe for a reason. And so a lot of times, believers, followers of Jesus, when they realize they're out on the fringe, they start to panic. They start to feel like everything's in trouble, like things aren't going to work out, and what if this, and what if that, and what if the government, and what if people, and what if somebody says, and what if somebody does, and what are we going to do? And the reality is, you don't have to. There's actually really good news. Because whether it's losing some privileges or giving and even having persecution come into our lives, we can make progress without privileges. We don't have to be afraid. We don't have to be scared. But when the future is a little bit fuzzy, which I think for a lot of folks, it feels that way right now, whether it's personal, whether it's in your family, or whether it's at your work, or even out in the broader culture, when the future is a little bit fuzzy, what we need is wisdom. We need wisdom to combat fuzziness. And there's a great example of this in Daniel chapter 2. If you have a Bible or you want to follow along in the app, we're going to be in Daniel chapter 2 today, because in Daniel chapter 2, we meet people that we met last week and we met in Daniel chapter 1, but they show up again. The first is King Nebuchadnezzar, and he is the king, the emperor, the ruler of the Babylonian Empire. And he had devastated Daniel's homeland, hauled Daniel off as a refugee from war, had enslaved him, had forced to change his name, forced him to learn a new language, forced him to study the Babylonian culture and laws and religion and everything else. And Daniel had lost everything. It's not hard to understand how that would happen. He lost his family. He lost his friends. He lost everything he had ever known. It's almost like going away to college. He's 16, 18 years old. He's plucked out of his home. He's taken to a foreign land. And it gets worse because, like I said, now all of a sudden he is forced to give up everything he's known, learn a whole new system, and live as a servant or a slave to this emperor. And it's already a hard, difficult situation. I mean, if you can imagine that happening to you or to your kids or somebody that you know, I mean, what a horrible, horrible kind of situation. But it goes from hard to worse. It goes from hard to desperate, because the king, Nebuchadnezzar, has a dream. And in this day and time, you got to understand, especially somebody in power, they believed that dreams came from God or gods. They believed that the dream was important, that it was something that they needed to know. They also believed, and this is to their credit, we need other people to help us understand this and interpret this and tell us, what does this mean? What is going to happen? We need to know, because we feel like this is a message from God and we want to take it very seriously. So Nebuchadnezzar has a dream, but he does something kind of interesting to me. He gathers up all his counselors and wise people and experts and all the smart guys that he has. And he tells them, I've had a dream. I want you to tell me what the dream is, and I want you to tell me what the dream means. And they were kind of, whoa. Wait, I mean, no, you tell us the dream and we'll tell you what it means. He's like, no. And here's why. He suspected something, that they were frauds. And I think deeper than that, he suspected, you're just going to tell me what I want to hear. I want to know the truth. I want to know that you actually have something, that you actually have some special insight, some special power, that there's a reason for you to be here. Because I know if I tell you the dream, you're just going to tell me what I want to hear, and we're just going to go on, and this is too important. He goes, now, if you can do this, I'm going to give you rewards, I'm going to give you riches, I'm going to promote you, I'm going to do all this other stuff, which sounds pretty cool. He says, if you can't do this is Nebuchadnezzar, not Brett, okay? He says, I will have your body cut to pieces and have your house pulled down on top of you with your family. So it's like, you're either going to win the lottery or you're going to be buried underneath the rubble of your house after you've been cut in pieces. It's like, those are your choices. And they're like, King, we can't do that. We don't know. Just tell us the dream. And he said, no, see, I knew it. You guys are all frauds. And this included Daniel. Daniel was much further down the food chain. He was not the guy that was the first one the king would come to, but he was in that group. And he finds out about what's happening because the king finally says, fine, kill them all, execute them all. And the executions are beginning. And in Daniel chapter 2, verse 14, we see what Daniel does and how he responds. Daniel chapter 2, verse 14 says this: when Arioch, the commander of the king's guard, had gone out to put to death the wise men of Babylon, Daniel spoke to him with wisdom and tact. He asked the king's officer, why did the king issue such a harsh decree? And Arioch explained the matter to Daniel. And at this, Daniel went to the king and he asked for time so that he might interpret the dream for him. Verse 17, then Daniel returned to his house and he explained the matter to his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. He urged them to plead for mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that he and his friends might not be executed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. During the night, the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision. Now stop right there for just a minute, because this is so important. Daniel shows us something here. And this is a principle, but I want to show you how it plays out in your life. He shows us something. That when the future is cloudy, when things are hard or things are even impossible, what we really need, what we need more than anything else, is wisdom from God. And wisdom comes from a relationship with God. Daniel didn't have that wisdom within himself. He didn't know. He didn't have the answer. He asked the king for time, but he didn't know what to do. He didn't know what was going on. But he did have a relationship with a God that did know. And wisdom comes from a relationship with God. And so we see Daniel do some very obvious things and some not so obvious things. There's two kinds of wisdom on display here. The first is what I would call common wisdom. It's just common wisdom. He goes to the commander, he's like, hey, what is going on? And once he finds out, did you notice how he responded? It says he responded with wisdom and tact. He didn't rage. He didn't get on social media and post a bunch of stuff. He didn't pound the desk. He didn't insist on his rights. He didn't stomp his foot. He didn't yell at the messenger. He didn't do any of those things. He humbly and wisely asked, is there any way maybe I could see the king? And here's the thing. It's common wisdom. Anybody could do that. But so many times people don't. But because Daniel believed that his future was held in God's hand, not the king's hands, he was able to be calm, he was able to be humble and likable and simply make a request instead of a demand, even though things were incredibly desperate. I mean, he was next. They were coming for him. He says, would you let me talk to the king? And then when he finally got to talk to the king, he said, could you just give me a little time, maybe one night? Common wisdom. But then there was also supernatural wisdom. You saw what he did. He got his three closest friends. He said, brothers, pray with me. We're all on the line here. We need God to step in and step up. Because if he does not, nothing can. Nothing will happen. We will be torn up. We will be buried under our houses. This will be the end. We need God to come through. And he does. And this is so powerful because all the experts, all the tech wizards, all the entrepreneurs, all the wealthy people, all the educated people, none of them had any answers whatsoever to Nebuchadnezzar's request. Tell me the dream and tell me what it means. The best they had was met with a blank stare. And yet, one little slave boy prays to his powerful God and ask God, would you show us? And God comes through like he always does. And it's such a powerful contrast because that is not the way things work today, is it? And here's what I mean by this. You've heard this expression. You got to follow your own truth. right? You got to be true to yourself. Daniel knew that the wisdom did not come from him. It had to come from outside him. But for so many people, and maybe you're in this boat too, we feel like I don't have any other resource other than me. I have to define what's right. I have to follow my dreams. I have to decide on what's moral and what's not moral. I have to be the one to pursue, to approve, to disapprove. Everything is up to me. It's all on me. I have to follow my own truth, and whatever I need has got to come from within me. I don't know about you. You're probably a better person than I am. I don't want it all to depend on me, right? I'm flaky. I'm not as disciplined as I need to be. I don't always make good choices. I can be judgmental. I can be spur of the moment. I can be wrong. I can be misinformed. I mean, there's just so many reasons why I could fail. If it all depends on me, me is in trouble. Maybe you're better off than I am. But do you know where this comes from? This comes from a Shakespearean play, actually. This saying that has become the gospel of our culture. It comes from the play Hamlet. And you'll probably recognize, I know you probably like, what is that? It was like junior high English, I missed most of that on purpose, right? I mean, but it comes from your junior high English play of Hamlet from Shakespeare. And there's a line in that play. It says, "This above all, to thine own self be true." And this really is the seed of where this whole mindset comes from, that everything's got to come from within me. I've got to be smart. I've got to define it. I'm the judge. I'm the jury. I'm the one that decides what's moral. I'm the one that decides what's best. It all comes from this, but here's the kicker. Here's the irony. It would be funny if it wasn't so tragic. Do you know who said this in the play? And don't feel bad if you don't. I didn't either. Let's go back and look it up. The character's name is Polonius. You know who Polonius is? He's the fool. He's the court jester. He's the one that everybody disregarded and thought was a dork and would say provocative things just to get attention. And I'm not trying to demean anyone. But do you realize the best our culture has to an answer to a future, to an answer to uncertainty, is to quote a fool from a 400-year-old play? That's the best we're coming up with on our own, right? But not Daniel. He's like, no, I've got to go to God. I've got to go to God. He's the one that holds the future. And so here's where this hits you. Maybe you feel like your future is a little uncertain. Maybe you're getting pressure at work. Maybe you're starting to kind of weigh what Bible says, what church says, what God says with what the world says, and you're starting to teeter-totter back and forth a little bit. And you feel like, I don't know if I really agree with that anymore. I don't know if I really believe that anymore. Maybe some of you, you've got your hand on the door of the church. You're like on the way of walking out of the church. I just want to encourage you. Getting wisdom gets you the right answer in the wrong situation. You may feel like you're not where you're supposed to be, that your world has not gone the way you want it to be, that the world around you is not doing what it's supposed to do, that things aren't working out, or maybe it's just one person that is making your life hard. You are in the wrong situation, much like Daniel was. But getting wisdom, which by the way comes from a relationship with God, getting wisdom, that will get you the right answer, even if you're in the wrong situation. It comes from this relationship with God. And Daniel displays that, but it's not over. Look down to verse 27. Because in verse 27, he finally gets to go see the king. He tells him, hey, Arioch, the commander, tell the king, God has given us wisdom. God's given us insight. Let's go meet the king. Let us give a shot at this. In verse 27, Daniel gets an audience with the king finally. Daniel replies, no wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he is asked about. And I would just update that, okay? No college professor, no entrepreneur, no tech wizard, no wealthy person, no powerful politician can explain to the king the mystery that he asked about. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. He has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in the days to come. Your dream and the visions that passed through your mind as you were lying in bed are these. And in just a moment, he's going to tell him what happened. But I got to pause there for a second. It's easy to read this as a Bible story from the Bible and think, well, yeah, that's how it's supposed to go. He's standing in front of the most powerful man on the face of the planet. He knows his life hangs in the balance. The king knows that Daniel feels like he has an answer, and he says, Daniel, hey, what is it? What's going on? What do you think? Tell me, man, what's going on here? He says, I can't. But there is a God who can. I mean, there is no more high pressure, high stakes situation. And I don't know what your future is. I don't know what you're feeling pressure from. I don't know where you feel like things are out of control or pushing on you the wrong way or creating the wrong situation for you. But be encouraged by this. Standing in front of the most powerful man on the planet with his life in the balance, he says, not me, it's God. And you need to know that. You need to know that the thing you want the most, King, it comes from him. It doesn't come from me. It doesn't come from your wealth or your power or your influence or all the other stuff. It comes from him. He is the only one that can solve this mystery. And when I read that, I couldn't help it. I had to go to Colossians chapter 1. Because in Colossians chapter 1, there's another mystery that's described there. And it's described as the great mystery, the way Paul talks about it. He says it's the greatest of all mysteries. And he goes on in some detail to explain it, and he's almost like an artist. He's kind of holding it for the big reveal. He won't tell what that mystery is. He won't tell what's happened. But he in essence, is encouraging people. He's saying, God knows the mystery, and God reveals the mystery. And they're like, yeah, tell us what it is. He says, when you need hope because your future feels hopeless, God knows the mystery, and he reveals the mystery. You're like, oh, yeah, okay, tell, come on, what is it? When you're struggling, when you're hurting, when you feel like your life is not moving in the right direction, and you've lost all joy because of your circumstances, there's still joy. Well, yeah, come on, tell us, what is the mystery? What is it? When somebody's making your life hard, when they're pushing on you, when they're creating problems for you, when it just doesn't seem like things are working out the way they are supposed to, and it feels like the future is out of control, your God is in control. Yeah, tell us the mystery. What is it? He just kind of keeps setting it up. And he says this great mystery is Christ in you, the hope of glory. And I know some people are probably waiting for this incredibly big statement. He just made an incredibly big statement. God is not only with you. When you become a follower of Jesus, he's in you. That you that I just described as me, that's flaky, that's undisciplined, that makes bad decisions, that's judgmental, that falls short all the time, that keeps shifting opinions, that me, he comes and lives in me. He doesn't just go with me. He's not just with me as long as I do it right. He doesn't just go along and kind of like a dad, like a parent, okay, well, they're going to mess up, they're going to struggle, but, I'm their dad, what do I do? I can't get out of this now. He's not like that. He's not just with you. He's in you. Our joy is in Christ, not in our circumstances. Our future is in his hands, not a culture, not a government, not the details and circumstances of the life that happens around us. Your future is secure, even if your present is a mess. I would say it this way, and I like rhymey things, so, forgive me, it is a little bit of a dad joke. But it's almost as if God looks at me and he says, you're fine because you're mine, right? You are fine because you're mine. This great mystery, known by God, revealed to us, revealed to Nebuchadnezzar. And you're like, but wait a minute, what about the dream? What happened with the dream? It's actually really pretty fascinating. Daniel tells Nebuchadnezzar exactly what the dream was. He says, I know what you saw, king. You saw a giant statue out in a field. And this giant statue out in the field that was standing up high had 4 different parts to it. It had a head of gold. It had a torso of silver. It had a midsection made out of bronze. And it had iron legs and feet that were made out of iron and clay. You're kind of like, okay, that's weird. What's all that about? And most people would see this and kind of think, okay, statue, king, like it's his kingdom or something, whatever. He said, but that wasn't all. The statue's out in the field. And a rock that's cut out of a mountain, and it wasn't cut out by a human hand, but this rock is cut out of a mountain, and it flies into this statue. And the statue goes down and it blows apart. It's destroyed so badly that all that is left is the dust that blows away in the wind. But this rock became a mountain, and it eventually covered the whole earth. That was your dream, King Nebuchadnezzar. And he's like, that's amazing. That's exactly what I dreamed. And he's like, that is so cool that you could do that. And again, Daniel, quick, no, not me, King. That was God did that. God told me that to tell you. Well, fantastic. Okay, tell me, what does it mean? What is this about? Why is this what I'm dreaming? And most people, Historians today, even scholars, people that study history, would agree with Daniel's interpretation right up until one point. Because it's exactly what happened. He said, King, each section of the statue represents a different kingdom. He says, the top is the head of gold, and that's you, which I'm sure he kind of smiled like, that's right. Yeah, I get to be the head. I'm the king. I'm gold. Yeah. He goes, that's your kingdom. He said, but eventually, there's another kingdom that's coming. That's the next section, the silver. And then a third, and then a fourth. And here's where historians would line up with this and say, yeah, that's exactly what happened. You may not know this if you've forgotten world history a little bit, but the Babylonian kingdom was overrun and overtaken by the Persian and Median kingdom. The Medes and the Persians. They overtook Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom. And they ruled for a while, for a couple hundred years actually. But then they were overtaken by the Greeks. And many of you probably heard of Alexander the Great, right? He comes in and he conquers the known world at the time. That's the third kingdom, is the Greeks. The last kingdom was a kingdom of iron that just rolled through everything else. It was the Roman Empire. Again, most historians have no problem with any of this. Even the feet, they said the feet was made out of clay and steel, that it was so divided, it crumbled and it fell apart. And they were like, yeah, that's exactly what happened to the Roman Empire. They got divided and generals started fighting with each other and the whole thing pulled itself apart. And they're all gone. So nobody has any problem with that interpretation. It's the rock that causes the problem. The rock that was uncut by human hands, that was born of a virgin, that flew into the middle of the Roman Empire and had seen everything blow up around it. The rock that became the church that's expanded to every continent on the globe. Millions of people that claim to follow Jesus. And nobody talks about the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, or the Romans anymore. They're dusty artifacts from history. And Daniel's message to the king is very simple. He's making it one simple point. King Nebuchadnezzar, there's only one king, and there's only one kingdom. There's only one. Yeah, you're a temporary ruler, and you're ruling this place, and you're in charge right now. But there's really only one king and one ruler that's going to last. Here's where this hits for a lot of us. We live in the United States of America. The United States of America is very divided. You know this isn't hard to figure out. Lots of people have lots of opinions about a lot of different things. We got different opinions about morality, about faith, about government, about a future, about all this stuff. And that's the way it is. The United States of America is not your kingdom. And don't get me wrong. I love being an American. We are incredibly fortunate. We have incredible freedoms. We have incredible prosperity. There's just so many things that are great about living in the United States. And I have family members that are in the military, and I like to vote, and I get, all the stuff. Yeah. But if you're a follower of Jesus, this isn't your kingdom. It's not. God showed Nebuchadnezzar, God showed Daniel, God showed us. Our future is in his hands. This is not our kingdom. We have something else to live for and something else to look towards. And in a nation that's so divided like ours, we're kind of like that Roman Empire. I mean, you feel like the ground is shifting and things are falling apart and things are getting wobbly and divided. The last thing we need is more division. We don't need to pour gas on the fire. What we do need, what we desperately need, is people that will get wisdom from a relationship with God and trust their future to the God that's in control of the future. And I know that you know that. I know that many of you have lived that. But I also know that for some reason right now, it feels hard. It just does. It feels like I'm faithfully trying to follow Jesus, but it feels like there's kind of a tug of war going on around me all the time. There's things that are pulling me and pulling at me and tearing at my peace that are just emotional, that are sometimes spiritual, and sometimes even physical. I mean, it's happening online, it's happening out in the workplace, it's happening in the world I live in, it's happening with the people that I talk to. And one choice is to try to shut everything down and just close myself off from all of it so that I never have to deal with any of it. But there's something that always pulls us back. And it's odd, isn't it? Because on paper, everything's good. On paper. We live in one of the most prosperous countries in the history of the world. You have better medical care than anyone that's ever had on the planet. You have better security and safety than most cultures have ever known. You can walk down the street to go get ice cream. Not now, you have to wait till October when it cools off. But I mean, you can take your family, walk down the street and go get ice cream. It's like, this is beautiful, this is wonderful. But so often, maybe it's just me, it also feels like a struggle. I'm really trying hard to follow Jesus, and all this stuff is pulling at me, and all these things are working against me, and the future's confusing, and people are doing bizarre stuff, and I'm hearing so many different messages all the time. It just seems really hard sometimes. And let me make a suggestion. You know why it seems hard? Because it is. It is hard. When you're countercultural, when you live on the fringe, it's never going to be easy. It's never going to be the situation where everybody just goes along with you. It's never going to be the situation where there is never any conflict or any disagreement or any struggle or any difficulty. It's never going to be like that. It is going to be a struggle. Daniel felt that pressure too. And I want you to look how this whole episode wraps up in chapter 2, verse 44. Daniel finishes talking to Nebuchadnezzar. He says, in the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all of those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of the mountain, not by human hands, a rock that broke the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold to pieces. The great God has shown the king what will take place in the future. The dream is true, its interpretation trustworthy. And King Nebuchadnezzar fell prostrate before Daniel and paid him honor. He ordered that an offering and incense be presented him. The king said to Daniel, surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and the revealer of mysteries, for you were able to reveal this mystery. And then the king placed Daniel in a high position, lavished many gifts on him. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and placed him in charge of all its wise men. Moreover, as Daniel requested, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego administrators over the province of Babylon, while Daniel himself remained in the royal court. King Nebuchadnezzar sees all this happen in front of him. And in the moment that he finally realized and understood what Daniel was communicating to him, he became a respecter of God. Now, I don't know that he became a follower of God. He respected God. He realized there was something at play here that was bigger than me. Somebody else that is in control more than I am in control. Somebody else that holds the future that I don't hold. But we don't know if he became a follower of God. And as we wrap up today, that's the question I want to ask you. Do you see yourself as a respecter of God or a follower of Jesus? Because those are not the same things. They're not the same. It is great to respect God, to believe that he is who he said he is. It is great to recognize that there is a God who is in control. It is wonderful to believe that there's a God who loves us and has a future for us. But the question is, are you a follower of Jesus? Because that's very different than being a respecter of God. For Nebuchadnezzar, the answer most likely was, no, I'm a respecter, but I'm not a follower. And I would implore you today, if that describes you, don't make the mistake that he made. When you become a follower of God, all of a sudden the wisdom that you need for the future that seems so confusing, God brings it to you. All of a sudden, the whole idea of just kind of being a ship without a sail and everything's on me. No. God takes that burden, takes that weight. He places it on himself and he goes, you can follow me, you can trust me. And that great mystery becomes a reality that God is not just with me, God is in me. And now my life is completely different because of it. You see, that's who we are as followers of Jesus. That's what he promises. That's what he gives. That's why following Jesus is not about a cultural thing. It's not about what everybody else says. It's about a relationship with God that changes everything in your life moving forward. Maybe that's the step that you need to take today, is to become a follower of Jesus and not just a respecter of God. For the rest of you, many of you, you already are followers of Jesus. And so I want to ask you to do something with me this morning. We're going to read a passage together. And so I want to ask you to stand with me for just a moment. We're going to read this. It's going to show up on the screen behind me. And as we read this passage, I want you to let the words simply speak to your heart. This is from Isaiah 46. It is God speaking to his people. And again, if you're not yet a follower of Jesus, this is something that could be yours. If you are a follower of Jesus, this already is yours. This is what God says to you. This is what God promises to you, even if the future feels a little fuzzy. And so we're going to read it together. Now, this is not super spiritual, but here's what I want you to do. There is punctuation in here, right? Okay, so we're going to read to a comma and take a breath, and then we're going to read to a period and take a breath so that we can do it together, right? Okay, because I think it'll be more impactful that way. But I really want you to hear what God says to his people when the future isn't plain. It's Isaiah 46, chapter 3. Let's put it up on the screen. Listen to me, you descendants of Jacob, all the remnant of the people of Israel. You whom I have upheld since birth and have carried since you were born. Even to your old age and gray hairs, I am he. I am he who will sustain you. I have made you and I will carry you. I will sustain you and I will rescue you. Let's pray together. Stay standing. Let's just pray together. Father, you promised to sustain us, to carry us, to rescue us. Father, sometimes we desperately and deeply feel the need to be rescued, and other times we think we're doing pretty good. The reality is, we always need you. We need to know what it means, this great mystery of Christ in us. Father, thank you that you have promised to walk with us and to carry us. And now as your eyes are closed, your heads are bowed, I just want to guide you through something for just a moment. For many of you, the future, the uncertainty, the pressure that you feel, I want you to take a moment and simply offer that up to God. For Daniel, he was feeling the stress of his life hanging in the balance. Yours may not be that dramatic, but whatever it is in your future that looks daunting, that feels uncomfortable, take a moment and offer that up to God. Ask him for his help. You already know that you need God's wisdom, because if you could handle it, you would have handled it. So take a moment and ask God for his common and supernatural wisdom to help you as you move forward, as you deal with the struggles that you have in your life. And now, take a moment just to be thankful, to be thoughtful, to commit to following Jesus, regardless of what the future holds. Father, we love you. We thank you. No matter how big or how small the struggle we face, not only are you with us, but you are in us. You carry us. You see us through from the moment we're born until our hairs are gray and our life is winding down. There's never a moment that we are out of your care. Father, give us courage. Give us wisdom. Help us to live as representatives of the Jesus that we follow. It's in his name we pray. Amen.